Another week of the imagination industry, and we are talking with creators, about creativity, and about money at some point, inevitably. Maria, my dear friend, would you like to introduce our guest for the episode today?
I love when our guests are connecting all sorts of skills and talents they have. And today we have a guest that is connecting fashion taste, artsy with engineering. She builds robots. That's the handle of Instagram, Christina Ernst. Really nice to see you in our podcast.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so
Hello.
much for having me today. My name is Christina, and as you said, I am the creator of the online platform She Builds Robots, which is dedicated to bringing girls to coding and electronics through projects with a fun or artistic flair. So excited to chat today.
Great. First question, because as I mentioned, you do a lot of different stuff. You have a daily job, you're an engineer, and Google, if I can share it. And you have this amazing project. It started on a hackathon, if I remember correctly. So I imagine you're going to a party and you need to introduce yourself. What do you choose? How you actually start a conversation with so many things happening in your life?
I love to use the phrase fashioneering to describe what I do. I think it gets to the heart of the matter right away. It's a little fashion, a little engineering, but kind of equal parts of both. And I think people really respond to that term because it's something a lot of people haven't heard of before. A lot of people don't think of combining these two disciplines. So dropping that word tends to yield a lot of excitement in people that kind of steers the conversation towards, what is that? And how does one engineer or, put a battery in a piece of fabric? What does that look like? So fashioneering is my favorite word to use for conversation starting.
When we're saying the word creator, you kind of, there's a sort of a bias. You automatically start thinking that this is probably a digital creator, content creator comes to mind instantly. And then, like, when you see what you're doing, it's a whole different set of things, right? So in this world where we are living with this digital first creativity, mostly, I would say, what's the power of making something physical, something tangible, something that you can, first of all, hold in your hands and then even wear in this fashioneering case?
Yeah, I think maker culture is so great at celebrating physical objects, specifically in the way that they can build community. So, for example, one of my favorite parts of being a maker, being a creator, is when I get to teach classes in settings like my public library, and when patrons aren't just coding something on a screen, but when they actually are creating a little circuit board that lights up or a little motor that moves. The excitement is just through the roof compared to something that might, purely exist physical on a computer, which of course is very cool to have something that physically exists only on a computer, but people get so much more excited over something they can touch and feel and show their friends and say, look, I made this.
And how was it for you? Was it interest in fashion first, and you just became engineer to let your creativity, out there and be able to build whatever you want? Or was it the other way around, and actually you just use fashion as a means to express all kind of skills you built as an engineer?
I would say fashion slightly came first for me. As a kid, I was always cutting up my clothes, which my mom did not appreciate, watching the fashion shows on TV. So I think my interest started there from the sewing perspective. But then once I started to sew, I realized how much math was involved in, creating garments and measuring and doing algebra. And that really got me interested in math as well. I was a huge math nerd in school. I was a mathlete. So seeing how well those two disciplines complemented each other was really exciting for me. And I followed my love in math in school and college through to a degree in computer engineering. But both of those loves have always coexisted for me, and it felt natural for me to try to combine them.
I just wanted to dig deeper into this notion of fashioneering that you created. First of all, like, it's an awesome term, right? You can kind of get it right away. What's the idea behind that? But do you ever feel like there's a tension between building things that actually work and creating things that are beautiful? Because we're talking fashion here.
Absolutely. And I always say that the designs that I make, they're not meant to be mass manufactured or sold
Mm.
or really even
Not an
seriously.
H&M kind of thing, right?
Right. I don't think any of us want to be, walking around with a battery pack strapped to us all day. And that's not the intention of what I make, right? I'm not trying to transform what we wear in our day-to-day lives. I just think fashioneering is a really cool vehicle for getting people interested in engineering, particularly girls, young women who might already have fashion is an interest, I think this speaks to them in a way that they don't often see engineering speak to them.
And the whole adventure, if I remember correctly, started on some hackathon, yes? And then that was the first project you created, and then Instagram happened to you, and some videos got viral. And it sounds like a very, nice start of amazing business. And still you run it more like an educational project when you are building community and sharing a lot for free. So I wonder, how do you see value of it? Do you think about monetizing it at some point? You mentioned that you do some education projects like when you teach. Is it this part of monetizing it as a business concept, or you try to keep it purely educational for some reasons?
It has been an interesting journey to try to strike a balance between the two. So the effort started exclusively as an educational effort. So as you said, I was at a hackathon in college, which if you're not familiar is this like often caffeine fueled, no sleep weekend of hacking around with technology and trying to build something. And I made this Bluetooth controlled color changing LED dress. And when it was time to demo that dress, that really spoke to a lot of the young women who were interacting with the project, and they were interested in learning to code purely to learn how to build this project. And that was such a light bulb moment for me and inspired me to develop similar projects and eventually to develop what became my online platform, shebuildsrobots.org, that had the free tutorials for these projects. So initially it was completely an educational only effort. After some time, I had been doing outreach using this platform. I had been, on my own dime shipping circuit kits to schools so they could do the projects. And obviously that wasn't sustainable just because it was self-funded. I had looked into the nonprofit route, but I didn't feel that I could necessarily sustain that either on top of a full-time job. So this is kind of when the transformation started to happen between moving more into the online content creation space, where I could still, nurture my own desire to build new and interesting things that I wanted to build, but also have that educational aspect where I could show what I was building on screen and talk about how it works and potentially still get girls interested in what I was building in the same way that She Builds Robots was originally intended to be. So it's kind of been a tightrope balancing the educational and the content creation aspect for me. I'm very much still working that out. And the classes I have taught in the past have not been part of my monetization strategy. Those have been through Chicago Public Library as a maker in residence that I did there. They have an amazing maker lab here in Chicago at our main library branch. And that was really gratifying to work with the public.
And do you ever think then about quitting maybe your daily job at some point? I don't know if anyone from your company is listening. Should we ask this question? But yeah, are you having this plan maybe in some longer horizon for yourself?
That's an interesting question because I know that is aspirational for so many creators. And, I'll never say never, but I do really like to tout some of the unsexy aspects of having a 9 to 5. For example, going into an office and having coworkers who have nothing to do with the content creation space, who are, my peers in the industry, who I can chat with about software engineering industry trends. I think that's really valuable and really good for my mental health to kind of have that balance. And of course, with the healthcare situation being what it is in the US, having health insurance tied to employment, that's a complicating factor for myself and a lot of creators as well. So I personally feel that I'm in a really sweet spot right now, being able to balance the 9 to 5 and the content creation on the side. And I'm enjoying kind of figuring out what that balance is and where that can take me.
Just a quick one on that. What do you do in your 9 to 5, if you don't mind me asking?
Yes, I work on an infrastructure team at Google. That's roughly what I can say without people's eyes glazing over. Doing a lot of data processing and what we call data pipelines. So just massive data sorting and processing. Very, like I said, unsexy work, but it scratches the coding itch in my brain. So I enjoy it.
Right. Okay. Now let's go back to something, well, sexy, I would say. That's actually how I discovered you. Well, first of all, thanks to my friend, and then thanks to the power of internet, I would say. In 2024, you posted a video about yet another robot that you created, and it was an animatronic rat from Ratatouille that was actually grabbing your hair, so it literally looked like that. What struck me specifically on your Instagram is that the most liked comment below that video belongs to Patton Oswalt, the actual voice of Remy, the rat from Ratatouille itself. Also, what struck me is that Ratatouille is not a mouse, it's a rat, which I didn't know. Anyhow, it's probably important. And the second most liked comment under that post was actually from the head of technology at Pixar. First of all, that's just jaw dropping. And then, like, how do you capitalize on these connections and on these moments of fame?
Yes, that was one of the most exciting moments in my maker career so far, just to get not only the, institutional validation from like people who work at Pixar, but just to see the joy that this brought to so many people. This was one of the only posts I've had where all of the comments were pretty much positive. So people really enjoyed seeing this, and that was very gratifying for me. But I think in terms of capitalizing on it and trying to run with that momentum, the big lesson from the Ratatouille project was making things with stories that speak to people. So I primarily work in short form content. I haven't dabbled too much in longer form YouTube. So I'm very realistic about the fact that I only have, maximum 3 seconds to get people's attention. And if I have to explain, oh, I made this little animal, and here's the reason why he would be pulling my hair, and here is all of the different pieces of that story, people aren't going to stay on board to listen to all of that explanation. But if you associate it with stories they already know, from Disney or mythology or other parts of life, they see the image come by, they instantly understand the story, the context, what's going on. And I think that's a really effective strategy to hook people in short form content.
That's actually also a very reflective on what your audience needs. And actually, we have some questions also to understand how you work with your audience. Do you analyze who is watching you? I know that Instagram is giving you some statistic about that, but you also have interaction on the comments. Who actually is your I don't know, not client profile, but like the audience profile, and then how you interact with them and how it influenced the process of your projects right now, of choosing the projects to produce for the next clip or something.
Yeah, my demographic has shifted quite a bit over time, which has been interesting to see how I can even manipulate those shifts based on what sort of hashtags I use or my captioning. So when I first started posting, my very first project that went viral, it was showing the tech behind this moving snake dress that I was working on. I was
Oh, we
only
gotta
showing the
talk about that.
technology.
Yes.
Yeah, the Medusa dress. I was just purely showing the code and the tech. I didn't talk too much about the fashion side. And then after that first video, my audience was, I think, about 70% young men. And I didn't really like the atmosphere that created, a lot of comments, a lot of nitpicking, a lot of corrections on, the technical aspects of what I was explaining. So over time, I started to emphasize the fashion aspect of my content more. The content was just as technical as before, but just in the captions and the hashtags I used, I emphasized that aspect a bit more. And now my audience is about 70% female. So that's typically on the younger women's side, roughly, 25 to 30. But a secret kind of secondary audience that I didn't realize until recently was as big was parents. I get a lot of comments, but also quite a lot of DMs from parents saying, I have a child that's really interested in robotics or fashion or both. And this is really inspiring me to see the different pathways that my child could take. Do you have any advice? So seeing the evolution of the audience and how, as a creator, you can kind of influence your audience demographic makeup has been quite an interesting journey.
You mentioned multiple times, and I can only relate as a woman that sometimes going with your project, especially I imagine in engineering field, to the out there to the internet, can actually attract some nasty comments, some people not being supportive, not finding a fun in it, but just the reason to pinpoint anything that maybe you could do better, but not in the nice way. And I wonder how are the female reacting towards that? How are women reacting? And also the education system. Do you feel that education system is supporting women to actually being engineers, or your mission is to somehow subsidize what's missing in the market and help women to be more open and get there, even though sometimes the world is not the most welcoming towards female engineers, I would say.
Yeah, so to your first question about the female reaction to my projects, I would say that the, small minority, not minority, but the small amount of DMs that I get from, women, or I should say girls who are students, that say something to the effect of, this convinced me to study engineering, or I was scared to go to this mostly boys STEM school, but I'm going to do it now because you've been such a good role model for me. Those make all of the other comments that I get completely worth it. It is so rewarding to hear that I've been able to be a transformative force in someone's education. That is so special to me, and that really just outweighs all of the negative, which has been, it's such a blessing when I hear, when an audience member reaches out to me about a situation like that, and I'm really delighted when they share with me. Now, to your question about the education space and what it can better do to support women, I think there are a lot of different facets to this issue. And I think one of them is just representation. I think there's only so much that a good, strong education system can do if, from the moment that women step in the door, they don't feel like they belong, they don't feel like they can aspire to the heights that their classmates who are male can aspire to. So I think a lot of the work needs to happen at a societal level, even outside of the education system, which is why I was so excited to see, TV programs like Mission Unstoppable be funded and have a very real audience, and a very real mission to kind of change the face of representation for STEM. So there's certainly no one size fits all solution. I think it takes a lot of different pillars, from, education to industry to entertainment, to work together. And I don't think anyone
To content creators as well.
Hopefully.
Mhm. I was just thinking, listening to what you're saying, from a marketing perspective, like my 9 to 5 looks like a constant observation of brands trying to beat the algorithm, because the algorithm kind of evens out what we see in our feeds, how we react to that, because everything is pretty much predictable and everything is becoming a commodity in terms of like the content pieces that we actually see in our feeds. um, you are a type of creator that brands are actually eager to work with, because right now the understanding is that unless you work with creators that are culturally relevant, that are creating momentum, and that are like investigating the cultural side of things, because that's how people are actually consuming the media, like that is what important for brands. I guess that is a very sophisticated way of me asking, have any brands reached out to you for some collaborations, and have you found that interesting at at a certain angle?
Yes, that has been very exciting and also a learning experience for me. So right now, of the monetization work that I do with She Builds Robots, sponsorships are the number one income stream that I have. Number two is speaking engagements, but that's to a much, much lesser extent than sponsorships. So that is where most of the money is coming from right now for She Builds Robots. And that has been very exciting to see myself grow as an engineer in order to meet the needs of these campaigns. For example, a lot of them don't have months to work with. They're looking to promote, a certain show or a certain product and really get a campaign out the door. And that has pushed the limit of my own design and engineering skills, saying, okay, what prior art can I pull on that I've already engineered, or what designs can I reuse, or how can I kind of creatively leverage any of my tech stack to meet the need of a very quick campaign. So that has been very exciting to, better understand the needs that a marketer would have from an engineer. Because as an engineer, I tend to think in longer timelines, in designing a product end to end that's going to be sold, rather than something that exclusively needs to be shown on a screen.
Yeah, so actually, I was wondering, because also I follow you and watch a lot of the content. I think I saw almost all the dresses you have on your profile published, and then I thought, okay, it takes quite a lot of time, I think, to build something like that, because there is a fashion, but there's this, you're building those small devices that have different functions. And I was thinking, is it like, what is the most time consuming? Is the production itself or the idea behind? And I don't know, are you interested in doing more, but just not physically able to, or you just not interested in algorithm game, meaning, publish almost every day if possible? Yeah. So how is it for you? What's driving the creation process?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question because the bottleneck, so frustratingly for me, is the actual physical creation time. So I would say I get a new idea for a project probably once or twice per week, and I can only realistically execute maybe 5 projects per year. So I have a huge backlog in my notes app of projects that I'm so excited about, up in the middle of the night, typing away at all of the ideas that I have. But I can really only execute such a limited number since I'm working on this, after my full time job, so evenings and weekends. So there's not really a specific bottleneck I can identify in terms of like a specific step. It's a little bit of the sewing, it's a little bit of the 3D modeling, it's a little bit of the iteration on different prototypes. All of these things are important, and all of these things give kind of equal weight to the wow value of the finished product. So, skimping on one is not really an option if you still want to have that beautiful result at the end. That said, I am able to kind of iterate on some of my skills and build some of my skills over the past year and start to work faster. It's been really exciting, for example, for the last year to get a partnership with a 3D modeling company and having access to their software and taking some time to step back and kind of up level my modeling skills using that software has allowed me to design faster after I initially invest the time in learning the software. So I'm hoping that by, flexing some of my engineering skills through the project of She Builds Robots, I'll be able to build faster eventually. But yes, to answer your question, there's such a backlog of things I want to build, and I'm excited to bring them to my page as soon as I can. But the actual fabrication of everything is the limiting factor for me right now.
So maybe one more question here. So if the production takes so much time, have you considered maybe creating more different pieces of content, of digital content out of every creation? Yes, because you could have longer videos, you could have maybe more articles and stuff. Did you thought about this, or you want to stick to this short format you use for Instagram for some reasons? And if yes, could you explain why?
Yeah, I have thought about it, and I do know it is a strategy that a lot of people employ successfully to post more about, their background or their life or their works in progress, which I think is great. I enjoy watching those videos, but for me personally, I don't want to become too arrogant, is the word I would use, I guess, in assuming that people care about me. I am not the brand here. I don't see myself as the brand here. I see the creations and kind of the wonder and the whimsy that they spark as the key hook for viewers. But you'll notice I don't really even use my name on my Instagram. It's just She Builds Robots. I really enjoy keeping the focus on the build and the project rather than myself as a personality. And maybe that will evolve over time, but for now, that is what's working for me. And that's the type of content that I really enjoy making most.
Christina, could you talk us through one of your favorite robots that you have built, but please make it very simple as though you're talking to a grandmother for the sake of all the people in, like, not in maths or engineering out there.
Absolutely. So, one of my recent projects was inspired by a pair of wings, but it was made out of gears. So, this design had a couple different moving parts, literally and figuratively. So, the first question I had to figure out was how I was going to make the gears move. The first solution came to me was to use motors. Very common way to drive gears if you don't want to manually turn them with your hands. So within that, there are a couple different motors you can choose. Some motors where you just plug a battery into it and it goes. Some motors where you have to write a little bit of code to tell it how to move. I first prototyped with the battery or the motor where you just plug a battery in, and that was moving so fast I was worried it would scalp me. So it's great to make these theoretical designs, saying, oh well, if I use this type of motor, then I won't need all of these extra parts. And that's all well and good to say in theory, but as we chatted about before with iteration and experimentation. Sometimes as soon as you see how fast it's moving, you realize that that is not going to be a practical answer. So in this case, I pivoted to a much slower moving motor that I wrote some code just to tell it to very slowly rotate. And then on my computer in a software called CAD, computer aided design, I designed some gears that would fit together and sit on top of that motor. And so when you drove the central gear using the motor that I coded, that would cause all of the other gears to move in parallel. And then finally, I had to design myself a little backpack so I could wear the wings and the little pack that contained the battery and the motor. And for that, that was just sewing. So touching on a lot of different skills and also touching a lot of trial and error for sure to keep myself safe and to make the design works.
Among the things that made it to the execution stage from your backlog are the Medusa dress with snakes that are actually moving, the dress that changes its color, the dress like a phoenix dress with feathers that move and react to the movement of the other of the surroundings. Then there was a Venus flytrap, which was one of my favorites. I guess it's really fun. The question is, how do you build your backlog? How do you stumble upon new ideas, and how do you prioritize that? Okay, this is going to be the month of the Medusa thing over the over something else.
Yeah, I think a lot of people assume that my inspiration might come from science fiction, but for me, fantasy is the big pull. So I like to start by thinking, if I was in a fantasy world, what would I wear, as the villain, or what would I wear to the castle ball, or, something like that, something that takes its inspiration from like a fun, magical world. And then I say, okay, technology is so advanced that we functionally kind of do live in a magical world. So what can I draw from the technology that does exist that I do know how to use to execute on this idea? So very fantasy heavy on my inspiration. Expect to see more of that in probably the coming year. But as far as prioritization, I bounce around so much. The thing I am dead set about being my next project this month will probably completely pivot 3 or 4 times by the time I'm actually ready to sit down and work on next month's project. I don't know, right now you can see I have like a gramophone piece behind me.
Ooh la la.
Okay. But we'll see if that gets preempted by a completely different project by the time I'm ready to post
What
about
a
it.
sneak peek. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I love it.
You got early access. Yeah.
Maybe we can interest you with our logo because we have such a nice logo with those small nuts. Maybe you can do something about that.
Love it.
That would be so awesome. Okay, we'll
That would
show
be
you.
awesome.
We'll talk.
Once we're done with the talking, we'll show you. One thing that kind of went viral as well was the already mentioned Medusa dress. So there was one article on the internet saying that, like, it's an actual headline: Google software engineer builds world's first AI dress. It has snakes staring at people. I'm like, wowza, that sounds really cool and pretty kick-ass. How has AI, if anyhow, changed the way you work and the way you approach your fashioneering world?
It certainly has changed the way I work with things in the physical realm more than I expected. And I do want to preface our whole conversation about AI with, acknowledging the fear right now that a lot of creatives have around AI and job replacement. I think those fears are valid. And I think it's more important than ever to, advocate for stronger social nets and stronger environmental protections. I think all of these things are true. And I think it's also true that, speaking from my very narrow software engineering experience, AI has been a wonderful and powerful tool for helping me execute on some of my builds more quickly. For example, just earlier this week, I was trying to wire up a new piece of technology, a little screen that I was going to code some images on that was drawing from, one brand for the screen and one brand for the little microcontroller, which is the tiny computer that I code, and a third brand for some of the other pieces, and cross-referencing all of those data sheets, that have some subtle differences because of the brands, but are similar in other ways, can be hugely time-consuming, very frustrating. So I asked AI to kind of synthesize what the wiring should be based on these different data sheets. And right away, it had solved the problem that I was working on for over a week. So something like that, where I can abstract away a lot of the grunt work of, data sheet referencing, has been really valuable for me and has really helped me reconnect with the joyful parts of engineering for me. I can just get back into building and coding the cool feature that I thought of and not spend time wrangling, the specifics of a particular part that I'm hunting down. So it's been cool to see how I've been able to use AI to help me debug things in the physical world for sure.
When you think about helping the process, AI obviously is now such an amazing thing, but there's also other options for you to, build a bigger operations, let's call it. Have you ever considered actually building a team around it? Because I imagine you have a network of other software engineers or engineers, and you graduated the university in that field. So have you ever considered maybe people actually ask you to join the project because it's so unique and different? And I imagine there are also other fields that can be connected to you. You choose fashion, but I remember one of the thing you did, and I love it so much, and I would love to have it at home, is the painting that has the lighting. So in the evening, you can actually light up your room with that. Have you ever considered like going that direction?
I haven't seriously considered it, and part of the reason is because when I'm going into a project, I don't necessarily know what the specifications of my project are going to be.
Hmm.
I might have this grand sketch and assume that it's going to work using, this type of motor and it will be mounted here. But as soon as I make the first prototype, all of those notions might completely fall apart. Maybe they don't work in the real world. Maybe some of the initial designs just weren't realistic at all. And I think that can be hard to navigate when you then, bring on a team of people who are expecting much more clear cut directions, expecting more engineering direction and a more tight scope. And I also just really enjoy pretty much every aspect of what I do. I love the sketching. I love the coming up with ideas. I love the prototyping. I love the coding. I wish I got to code more. I think every single project I do only involves like max 2 hours coding compared to sometimes like weeks of sewing. So I love the technical parts so much that I don't want to outsource them at this time just because those are so joyful for me.
What was the most fulfilling thing that happened to you on your creative journey?
So far, the most exciting opportunity that has come out of She Builds Robots is I got to be featured as an engineering correspondent on a TV show. I got to fly out to LA and be part of a TV show that is specifically aimed at getting teen or tween girls interested in science, technology, engineering, and math. It's called Mission Unstoppable on CBS. And it's kind of a variety show. It takes different female engineers from different disciplines and shows them, either in the field, in the lab, or demonstrating how to do a project. So I shot a couple episodes where we wired up some of the little robot projects for my website. We made a little like bat that flaps its wings. We made a little crown that lights up. So it was so fun, and it was really exciting to see, the glamorous part of a production like this that I never thought that engineering would have, afforded me the opportunity to be part of something that feels glamorous.
I have one final glamorous question, if I could, because it really speaks into like what you just mentioned. If imagine if you were to dress someone for Met Gala, who would that be, and what would be the dress concept?
I think Chapel Roan is a big style icon of mine. I love what she's doing with the fun avant-garde looks. I would love to design something for her.
Yeah,
Concept, I'll have to get back to you. I have so many ideas right now for
backlog.
like different potential Met Gala
We'll try
themes.
to
Like
connect you once we have big podcast. We will try to connect you so we can
my
make this happen. Hopefully.
my bet, which is based on absolutely no data, I just feel it in my gut that next year might be like a space themed Met Gala. And so for that, I have
Okay.
this grand plan of some, wearable mechanism that has rotating planets around you with, some gears in it and just some really pretty movement mechanisms. So stay tuned. If that ends up being the theme, I'll probably make that look. But, your lips to God's ears that it will end up on a celebrity someday.
Yeah, she
Amen.
builds robots. Yes, helps Met Gala happen. That would be cool. That would be the
Fingers
coolest thing.
crossed.
Yeah. We have very last questions. So if you could think about them and really give us short answer, and hopefully that will make some fun for you as well. First money you ever earned.
That was a sponsorship that came right after my first post on my Medusa dress. That was from a group called RS. They sell electronics parts. And that was so cool. That was the first moment that I felt like an influencer, to use that word lightly. Being able to fund my next round of buying more electronics parts and keeping the cycle going.
Great. One big thing you hate about being creator.
The amount of time and energy you have to dedicate just to being online when you just want to be creating. I love, to an extent, I really enjoy video editing, which I would argue in and of itself is part of the creative process. But then, trying to keep up with algorithms or keep up with commenters or keep up with DMs, like it's wonderful to engage with fans, but being a woman online means you will also engage with people who are not fans, and kind of straddling that line between keeping your engagement up, but also protecting your own energy and your own mental health is a fine line to walk sometimes.
Who are you following? If you could name three creators that you think everyone should know and you love them, let's spread some love towards other creators.
One of my biggest inspirations in this space is Cameron Hughes. He does very similar work to what I do. He has been doing it longer than me, for sure. He was one of the first creators I saw, I think, in around 2020 doing this work, and that was my inspiration to start posting the type of work I was doing. So he has been a big inspiration, and especially he shows his process. He shows the actual tech that he uses, which has been very helpful. So big shout out to Cameron. I also have been following Becky Stern for a while. She is an electronics creative who also has kind of an art electronics fusion background. She's been posting since even before I was in college, I think. She was a huge role model for me while I was in school. I'm like, oh, I want to be her. I want to work in this wearable tech space. So she was a big inspiration to me. And then finally, my friend Brittany Ann Cohen, she has been doing these really cool projects on Instagram with making purses and corsets with like moving fluid in them in tubes. So combining her electrical engineering background with, fashion and artistry is so awesome. So many cool creatives out there. It's been an honor to be able to follow them and learn from them. And thank you for asking so that I can hopefully get more audience members towards some of these creators.